Welcome back to Creator Calls, where I get some of my favourite creators to invite us in and share a little bit about their YouTube journey with us. Some of you listening don't have time to start a YouTube channel, or so you think. You might have family commitments, a demanding job, a social life. Well, today's guest seems to have figured out a fine balance, and I'm hoping he's going to share some of his secrets with us today. David's been posting content consistently for over 3 years on his iCaveDave channel, and recently started a podcast, Aluminium, where he talks about Apple news with a British accent. Great name, and it's a fantastic podcast. Dave, welcome to the channel. It looks like you've been busy.
Always busy, my friend. It never stops. But it's fun.
How have you found kicking off a podcast and integrating it into your current set of videos?
It's the biggest part is actually finding people to come on who can sort of fit around the other schedule stuff. Because I do have a whole family. I have a full-time job. I try and put out at least a couple, 3 videos a week of normal long form type stuff, and now I'm trying to get some shorts out as well. It's the podcast feeds shorts quite nicely though, with clips.
Yeah, I have found that myself, and using Riverside, this platform, it makes it a dream with the annotations underneath as well.
Absolutely, yeah, and it grabs a lot of the clips out for you with AI, and then you have to fix them. It doesn't do a fantastic job on the start and finish points, but you can just edit it with the text editor, which is really cool. And then I throw them typically into CapCut because I prefer the captions coming from there. It's a little bit quicker, a little bit snappier, and that's free as well, so that's nice.
Yeah, it's always ideal. But for me, the consistency of your channel is really where we've got to start. So what's the longest break you've taken from uploading?
Oh, it's probably like a week or so. Not a great deal longer than that. But I mean, in 2020 when we started out, I threw a few videos up there early on under the name, what was it called? Living on iPad. Because just during the lockdowns, I was trying to sort of see if I could do everything that I did with the Mac using an iPad. And it wasn't even a new iPad. It was the 5th gen base iPad or something like that, and that went okay for about 3 months, and it was quite sporadic. There was a bit of gaming stuff on there, but then when we got the announcements that Apple was basically moving to Apple Silicon and transferring those chips that we'd seen in the iPads for years, the AX chips, if you like, that they were going to be powering the Macs, it sort of made sense for the channel to talk about Macs then. So we did a bit of that, and I went to doing a once a day, 5 days a week podcast, sort of newsy format, not really a podcast, but I did start out by throwing those onto Anchor as well, just the audio, because I had so much spare time, because we were all sitting at home doing nothing. And then, yeah, I think I did the daily shows without any breaks, other than the weekends, for about 1.5 years, and we went from 0 to monetization on YouTube in less than 3 months, so getting 1,000 subs and 4,000 watch hours. But yeah, Apple Silicon helped a lot with that.
That is crazy. So yeah, this is my first Mac that I've ever had, which is the M1 MacBook Pro.
Yep.
These M1 chips are what convinced me to change. But daily for that long, what do you think drives that level of consistency? Like, what was the driving force behind that?
I think it's partially ADHD and getting a hyperfocus, where you just like, this is what I'm doing now because I have nothing else to really focus on. You know, we were furloughed from work. At the time I was working for a drinks wholesaler. So obviously the bar industry was basically shut down. Didn't really have anything else that we could do. You know, the first couple of weeks, no one really knew what was going on, and we were sort of like, are we still working from home but not really doing anything? And, you know, and then, you know, the proper guidelines came out that said, no, if you work from home, then they have to pay you, not the government. So they were like, nope, everyone stop working. I was like, I'm on it.
That's good for me. You can count on me, guys.
Yeah. And I did do a bartending podcast years ago. And then when lockdown hit, I kind of wanted to bring that back as like a breakfast show for bartenders that I was doing for a couple of weeks during the lockdown at the beginning. But because bartenders weren't bartending, it didn't really have any new content to talk about, whereas Apple was getting super exciting. And I'd been using a iMac for, I think, no, my first MacBook was the 2011 11-inch MacBook Air, which at the time was insanely quick. just because it was SSD. That was my first experience of SSDs. And then I ended up getting a 2013, I think it is, iMac, which is actually still sitting up here. And that's what I sort of built the channel on, and I really got interested in like the history of Apple and stuff, so I started collecting old stuff from eBay and things like that. Buying up all the old PowerPC ones because I just love the designs, and I think it's somewhere around 20 Macs in the house at this point.
Yeah, so if someone was to like jump onto your channel now, then what sort of videos would they be expecting like this past like couple of months?
So the stuff we've been talking about the most recently is obviously Apple Vision Pro, which is the new sort of super high-end, super expensive headset that Apple's coming out with that we're not allowed to play with in the UK for a little bit. Although luckily I do have a friend who is, I think, on an aircraft on the way to America right now, who's going to be coming back with one because he's also a content creator around Apple TV. That's Sigmund Judge, who does the Magic Rays of Light podcast. So all of their content is around Apple TV, the content that they make, the hardware, the software that comes with it, all of that sort of stuff. So that's going to be super fun. Hopefully going to be taking a little trip down to see him. But yeah, at the moment, it's still the kind of news format is the main thing that we do. So I'll try and pick on any given day 3 stories that are interesting, and then community content as well. So at the end of those 3 stories, we then take audience questions that come in from the comment section, which we call iCave Answers, and I answer basically every question that gets asked.
Yeah, I've got to ask, as you've mentioned Vision Pro, do you think Vision Pro is going to be the headset which brings it into the mainstream, the AR VR?
I don't think the first generation will be. I think it's going to make it aspirational, though. And I think at the moment, it's very much a niche thing. Having, a Quest or a Pico is actually the one that I've got, the Pico 4. And again, that was sort of sent over for me to test by a sponsorship. So I made 6 videos on that, got a free headset and a bit of cash. Happy days. And I do really still enjoy using it. After, we're 6 months on now from having it. It gets used every single day. It's not always by me. The kids love it. But whether it's going to bring it into the mainstream straight away, I think we're going to get a lot of controversy because today, as we record at least, is the day that the first reviews are likely to be going out from the chosen few. So I would expect Marquez Brownlee, iJustine, all of those guys to have their reviews coming. But I think one thing that speaks volumes to it is that a huge amount of the people that got the free demos have also gone out and splashed down their own cash. So when Apple sends out review units, they're only sent out on loan. They are taken back by Apple. Apple doesn't give out free hardware to people for reviews, which I think is good because it removes a little bit of the concern for fairness in the reviews, whether you're getting something for free or whether you're just getting to test it. But I think it speaks volumes that people like iJustine was up at 5 a.m. in the States on pre-order day because she absolutely had to have one as well that she'd get to keep. I think that's really interesting. All the people pretty much that have tried it wanted it and wanted to keep it.
Yeah, it's really telling when they've tried it a little bit. I know there was some people made some comments about the weight of it, but it clearly hasn't bothered them that much if they're up at 5 a.m. trying to get it.
Yeah, there's always going to be a little bit of a trade-off there because Apple won't produce a unit that they're going to have as this flagship product that's made of cheap plastic. We back in the day, we had plastic MacBooks. We had the polycarbonates sort of around 2007, 2008, 2009. But now Apple's known for the build quality, and it does show. Glass and aluminium as a headset is quite heavy. That's why they've had to separate the battery as well. But altogether, if you were to wear, the Vision Pro headset with AirPods Max, for example, you've got over 1 kilo on your head, which is going to be quite cumbersome. A couple of bags of sugar.
Yeah, with the separate battery, the separate battery is actually a great idea when it comes to keeping the headset light and extending the battery. There's no reason it couldn't have been a huge battery. I would have rather it been like double the size.
Yeah, I get that, but it's also, you have to remember that as it is, it's nearly £1 for that battery. Yeah, that's quite a hefty thing, and certainly if they'd integrated it into the headset, that would have been far too chunky. But what you will be able to do is take something like, my iPhone is actually charging as we're making this video. knock over a can, great stuff. But one of these battery packs, so this is a Shah Geek that I'm using, and that thing will charge your laptop a couple of times. You can daisy chain that off of Apple's battery pack. So you could, as long as you've got 30 watts going into the battery, you should be able to basically hot swap other batteries through it.
Yeah, so you can keep you going.
Or you can plug into the mains. Like everyone's said, oh, you can't even watch a whole movie on it. Yeah, but are you going to be wandering around your house while you're watching this movie in a fully immersive environment? You're going to be tripping over stuff. Like, you're going to sit down, you might as well just plug your battery pack into the USB, into a USB socket.
Yeah, I guess what I want to ask you then is, it can be really tough to get started with a niche and to pick a niche and stick with it. Why did you choose Apple and run with it? Like, what's the background there with you and Apple?
So my first taste of Apple stuff would have been the iPhone 4. I was very much like a Windows Phone user. I was using, it was an XDA Orbit 2 at the time, which I was super happy with it. It had got sat nav on it, and this is like 2009-ish, 2010 is when the 4 came out. And I was due an upgrade. I was going into the O2 store in Birmingham, and you couldn't get your hands on the iPhone 4. It was the first one that had the Retina displays. It was the first one that had FaceTime. It was the first time we had selfie pointing cameras, all that sort of stuff. And I walked in, and they'd got one. And I was like, well, it's not actually much different price-wise. To go for this rather than, and I think it only had like 16 gigs of storage or something daft like that, maybe even 8. And I was just like, oh, you know what, I'll have it. But in my head, I'd got a phone already that I could play music on, I could use for sat nav, I could use it for all of the stuff that I thought an iPhone could use. And then I sat on my bed and I unboxed it and I went, oh, this is why. And it's just that kind of the magic of the Apple device compared to all the stuff that on paper could do the same stuff. The way that everything works, the intuitive nature, like how smooth everything was. And this is like, 15 years ago nearly now, 14 years ago. And if you pick one of those up now, it still feels quite modern, quite current. You can see the lineage really clearly.
Yeah, I've been doing a lot of that recently, checking out some older phones. So I've got a bunch of old Pixels, but I do look into like the old Apple stuff as well. And when you're looking at it, phones build quality wise, like the actual feel in the hand, like the Pixel 2 XL that I've got behind me there, when you pick it up, it still feels like a modern phone. And yeah, they just feel special, especially when you're like unboxing them for the first time as well. I guess with Apple stuff then, it feels like the news is constant and you've always got stuff to cover. Does it feel like that to you, or are you ever trying to like fill a slow news week? Or
there's definitely both. There's all of the above, 100%. But when I first started the channel, and when I said to myself, look, I'm going to do a daily news show, I don't stick to it daily now. But when I started off, I was like, there's at least a dozen entire websites that are news Apple websites. If they can survive 12 of them constantly, I can find something to talk about Apple every day. And the big thing that helped fill it was actually that iCave Answers thing, the community side of stuff, because I was at the time when I started the channel, I was also a community manager for Gary V over on Facebook, so I was running the First in Line group over there. So I've stepped back from that now because just time. But for a couple of years, I was kind of semi-adminning it, not quite on Team Gary V, but originally I was reporting directly to one of the guys that was on there, a guy called Zane, who is just incredible. One of the most inspirational people I've ever kind of worked with. And he then moved into the NFT space after like the VFriends stuff all happened. And he does a lot of animation and that kind of stuff. But when he left, he basically sort of handed the keys to me and said, go, you've got this. So I did that for a little while, and that's why community, I think, is the big thing for me with the channel. Like, every comment that gets left on any of my videos over the past, now 4 years? Are we coming up 4, 5 years nearly? Every comment has been answered, and normally answered within the week. Occasionally there's one that slips through the net and things like that. Filters grab some of it, but yeah. And I think that's made such a difference. Like, when we were doing the news shows, we would premiere them every day, and while I was at home during COVID, I would sit there and chat live to people in the comments while it was going on.
Yeah. So behind the scenes then, I kind of wanted to dive in a little bit. So what does it look like to create an iCaveDave video? Like where do you even start?
So let's take it as being one of my like daily news shows. Like that's the most sort of common version of it. So I would sit down in the evening once the kids are starting to settle down a bit. So maybe 7, 8 o'clock. I would go through the news websites. So your Mac Rumors, your Supercharged, your 9 to 5 Mac, Cult of Mac, all of those. The standards that everyone kind of goes to. Apple Insider. And I'd look through, and it would be what are the news stories in the past day or so that have grabbed me. Yeah, if I hadn't already spotted them during the day. The Notes app on my iPhone is always full of script. So if I see an interesting news story during the day, I'll pop it in there, like grab a link, chuck it in, and I would script everything out on Notes, normally on the Mac rather than the iPhone, but if I'm out and about or if I was at the gym or something like that. So put the script together, and the script is basically word for the news section at least. So I'd put the headings in, write it out, kind of got quite good at writing in my own voice so that it doesn't feel too scripted. And then I would take my second iPhone, which is actually my work phone, and basically paste it into a teleprompter app. So I've got a little teleprompter that sits on my desk, and normally in the evening while the kids are in bed and the lighting's a little bit better in here, it's super bright right now. I've got the actual light on, but we also get some window stuff. But at night, I'm able to sort of control the lighting a little bit better. And basically, teleprompter, shoot through the iPhone. So everything on my channel is shot on iPhone. I don't have regular cameras. The only non-iPhone camera that I have is actually an OBS bot, little mini webcam that kind of chases you around the room. It's one of those gimbaled ones. And then, basically I would set the iPhone up in the teleprompter, other iPhone at the bottom. I've got a little Bluetooth remote for it, and and just read off the script. The iCave answers I never prep, so I basically just paste them straight into the bottom of the teleprompter, and those are always off the cuff. So you get that kind of separation between the news stories and then the community content at the end. And everything gets shot using a continuity camera, so I don't actually record onto the iPhone. The iPhone works as the camera, as it is right now, as the webcam for the Mac, and the Mac records it directly onto its own internal drive, and I use the M2 MacBook Air for everything. So Final Cut, editing, recording onto it. I've recently updated the audio, but again, it all records straight into the Mac in a single file, so I don't have to resync stuff too much. I always do a clap just in case, because there are times when you're like, this is off by like three or four frames, and it's almost impossible to know which direction. For some reason, I don't know why that's so hard, but if you do that sync clap, it makes all the difference when you find that it's like, this just doesn't look right.
So how long are we talking for all of this then? Are we talking like a day to find some articles and scripts, and then a day filming, editing, or is it all one day?
No. So, for example, the video that I put out the other day, which was on, it was a little bit different because it was a single topic, but it was the why Vision Pro is not overpriced. And it was about a 6-minute video once it had come out from the edit. But I think scripting took me about an hour. Shooting it took me about 9 minutes. 9 minutes to shoot a 6-minute video is not too bad with the setup and the takedown. But everything lives in this little space, ready to go, basically. So I have one little dock that I plug into the MacBook, and that attaches the Vocaster and the microphone that I've just bashed. That goes straight in there. That also connects to my external display, which is actually a TV. It's a 40-inch JVC TV that, again, I bought during lockdown. It's also got Ethernet on it, so when we do these kind of calls, it's reasonably stable. And then the MagSafe slots through that. But yeah, basically, you just chuck it straight onto the teleprompter, and about 9 minutes to shoot. About 50% longer than what the video ends up being typically. And then the edit, it goes straight into the edit. Sometimes do that the following morning. And normally a 10-minute-ish video will take me a couple of hours to edit. But if I ever do a video where it's sort of shot on one day and then not edited at least the next day, it's just never going to get done. It just sits on my phone and never gets finished.
Yeah, the amount of half-finished scripts I've got on my phone, and you don't see them till like weeks later. You're like, oh, I could have done that, and now it's not relevant. But I'm going to get a little bit self-indulgent here then, because I can't have you on and not ask you about what gear you're using, because you've already mentioned a little bit about the phone that you're using, the Mac that you're using. So is it a new iPhone? Is it a particularly old iPhone?
No, it's the 14 Pro. It's my daily driver that's in my pocket all the time. So everything matches up when anything that I shoot gets recorded on this. I've got a couple of little bonus bits that have been sent to me by people over the years. So Joby sent me a couple of their tripods. So at the minute we're sitting on a Joby GorillaPod with a MagSafe mount, which is really nice, really convenient because you can just plonk it down anywhere. Microphone is super cheap, actually. It's a Shure SM58, which is basically, excuse the noise here, it's the one that you see comedians and singers use all the time. And it's literally $100, £100, pretty much. I'm going to pop this back on, sorry.
No, it's fine.
We won't mess around with it too much more. But the capsule inside it is exactly the same one that is used in the SM7B, which is the 400-ish pound microphone that people use in studios all the time. So why? Why would I pay 4 times as much for it? And then that records into a Vocaster 1, which is sitting on my desk. And that's a USB XLR interface. I always thought, up until about 3 weeks ago, I don't need any of that. I've got a USB microphone. It's absolutely fine. And then I did my first podcast, and it sounded like absolute garbage. So, so I upgraded.
So how does this compare to what you started with then?
So in terms of when I first did my YouTube videos, I was actually shooting on a proper camera. I was shooting on a Lumix G7, and then I upgraded to an iPhone 12 Pro. Because the video coming out of that versus a 4K full, it was a micro four thirds sensor and stuff. Like the problem that I always find with regular cameras is it's always hunting. It's always like trying to refocus itself. And yeah, you can get much higher end ones, but I think unless you know what you're doing with cameras, using a phone is going to give you better results 95% of the time. Like, you have to put a lot of work into a real camera to get a good result out of it, whereas the iPhone kind of does most of it for you. Like,
so
it's
plug
not
in
bad.
and play.
Yeah, absolutely. And with this, it's not even plugged in. It's wirelessly sending this to my Mac and then to you, and that's what it does with all of it. But yeah, I think the audio upgrade has been a big win. These are Audio-Technica headphones. It's the M20X, I think, which is like their very entry-level 50 quid set. But it does the job. It's way flatter for me. It's much more kind of usable. And I definitely think if you're going to be recording podcasts, it does make a difference to at least go some way to addressing the audio.
Yeah, what do you think's made the biggest impact for you then, if like any of the upgrades that you've made?
Going from Intel to Apple Silicon, that was a huge difference. I mean, I was admittedly using a reasonably old iMac. It was a 2013 model, as I say, but that had got an SSD running and 24 gigs of RAM, and then I went to an M1 Mac Mini with 8 gigs of RAM, and the difference was night and day. Like, it's so much faster. And as I say, now we use the M2 MacBook Air, which is absolutely enough for most people. Again, only 8 gigs of RAM. I went slightly bigger with the storage on it. I went to a 512 just because I want to be able to actually take it with me. Whereas the Mac Mini, you can plug as much external into it as you want. I've got 6 terabytes attached to it. So it's Apple Silicon made a huge difference to everything, I think.
Yeah, before I got this MacBook, what was I using? There was a particular Creator Asus laptop, screen at the top, screen at the bottom. I think it was just something Duo. Yeah. And it wasn't even old when I swapped it for this. And this has just changed the game. It's made life so much easier, so much smoother. Like, editing isn't a chore anymore. Like, everything just seems to work. It doesn't frustrate you.
No, absolutely. And I think that's the thing. It's not about how powerful it is, how long does your export take, which is what everyone is always focusing on when they do these reviews. I think it's far more far more important to have a system that you can sit down at, you can get the work done, and then you can walk off and make a cup of tea while it exports. I think the usability, and with this Mac as well, I mean, it's an 8 gig system. I'm using Final Cut and Photoshop at the same time, and then I've got 2 different browsers open, Chrome and Safari, because for some reason Riverside still won't work in Safari, which is really annoying.
It barely works in Chrome for me.
Yeah, exactly. Which is quite annoying, but like I'm looking at my dock now and I've got 10 apps open and I'm using about half of the RAM. And we're doing all of this, so I don't think 8 gigs is the handicap that everyone seems to think with Apple Silicon.
Before we move on to this next section then, which I've dubbed Ask 10, there'll probably be more than 10 questions. I just wanted to shout out a recent stand-up comedy gig you did, all for charity. It's hilarious. Yep. And yes, I do miss Wilco's. If you want me to understand that, you'll have to go and watch it. Do you think the experience of doing that has helped you on YouTube at all?
Yes. Absolutely, and I'm actually wanting to do a bit more stand-up as well. There's a reason that I went for the standard stand-up microphone as well, so that I can pull it off of here and take it with me if I need to ever do a gig that doesn't have the mics and stuff in place. Yeah, it was really good. We did sort of 8 weeks of training with a pro comic. Shout out to James Cook. Look his stuff up online. He's really, really funny. And yeah, we had a couple of hours a week for 8 weeks where we'd just go down and we'd sit and we'd do a bit of writing, and then we'd perform for each other and give each other feedback, and it was like quite a collaborative process while we're sort of giving each other jokes. But even one of the early workshops that we did, we just took a news article from the BBC, and it was like, right, how many jokes can we get into this, sort of have I got news for you style almost. And I think our one was about bed bugs coming over from Paris, was it? I think something around
coming
along
over
those
on
lines.
the train.
Yeah, that was it. It was Bedford is being overrun by bed bugs from Paris, and I was like, coming over here, taking our blood. There's loads of stuff. There was, I think I did something about them being deported to Rwanda, all that sort of stuff. Really, just playing with the idea of it coming in, and that has been really good. So now when I write my script, I'll do a second pass on my script and see, is there anything I can chuck in here that's quite amusing. And certainly that Vision Pro video that I did, I used quite a few of the techniques, and it kept the retention really high, and it did about 5 times more views than most of my videos, so it kind of works. Just takes a bit of effort.
So I've just checked, the Just Giving page is still open, so we'll link that down in the description, and if anyone wants to donate.
Yeah, it's just iCaveDave, isn't it? It's justgiving.com/iCaveDave.
Yeah. Anyway, time for Ask 10, where we're going to dive a little bit deeper into your relationship with YouTube. So, out of creating thumbnails, titles, and filming, which do you spend the most time on?
Oh, filming. I'm terrible at thumbnails and titles. Like I do none of the best practices. I have started reducing the amount of text on them. That helps. But I think as well with the kind of content that I do most of the time, because it's news content, and every time I speak to someone like Viper from vidIQ or any of these things, it's like, how do you title and thumbnail something effectively where you've got 6 different topics within a video that's 8 minutes long? And they keep saying to me, make them separate videos. So one of the things that I've been doing recently, certainly with the last kind of full-on video that I did, you might notice that all of the news items are 55-ish seconds. So I ran through them with a timer before I filmed to make sure they'd be sub a minute, so that I can then break them out into shorts or repurpose them as separate videos as well. But yeah, I think I always put the most time into, actually the most time goes into scripting.
How have you found that working for you, the 55-second thing, split them into shorts? Is it working pretty well?
So I haven't, because I'm useless, I haven't actually got around to doing it yet. But that was the intention. And I think it's quite good in terms of trying to keep the content tight as well. Because I'm the kind of person that will ramble, as you will have noticed in the first half of this interview. I will quite happily go on chatting about stuff for far too long. And I definitely noticed myself doing that in the iCave Answers sections, where I'm kind of reading them for the first time. I'll give every question a quick eye over to make sure it actually makes sense for me to answer, and then there's a handful that I'll just pop a response in the comments instead. But I try not to overread them, so I don't want to kind of have an answer prepped in my head for most of them. There's the occasional one where I'm like, oh, it's comparing two things on a Geekbench score, so I'll need to just grab that, grab the numbers, so that I actually know how they compare. But yeah, in general, I think trying to keep the content as tight as it can be. Look at Linus Tech Tips and the quick bits that they do, for their kind of 3 times a week news thing. I was sort of looking at them and going, they only managed to do entirety of tech news 3 times a week. Why am I kicking myself to try and do 5 days a week just on Apple? But yeah, that's the thing with the podcast as well. I'm trying to open it up a little bit more, so I'm not just getting Apple fans. Like we had David Lewis on the first episode, who has been using Android kind of full time recently. We had Saran on, who I used to do a sort of mini podcast with, and then we had John Prosser. So I've not done great on the not all Apple stuff so far, but we have got other people coming on. I don't want to sort of reveal too many, but Luke Miani has spoken to me in the past when we've done stuff. Jacqueline MBT has said that she would be interested in coming on when we can get diaries and things. So there's going to be some really cool guests. So it will be good.
No, I'm excited to see them. So the next question then: how often do you check YouTube Studio?
Far too much. Probably on a day that I've put a video out, it will be 3 or 4 times during that day, before the end of the day, and we normally put them out about 1 p.m. So yeah, quite a lot too much. But not that I do anything with the information. I'm not the kind of person that goes back in and changes titles and thumbnails unless it's absolutely tanked. If it's if people are watching it and people are enjoying it, that's fine. I almost think it's trying to trick people, and sometimes people might watch the same video twice if you change the thumbnail and title and then be annoyed about it. So yeah, it's more about feedback for the next video than sort of adjusting what I've already done.
Yeah, I spend far too much time in YouTube Studio. Thinking the more I look at it in Studio, it'll change. It'll change the stats.
Sometimes though, especially if you get a video that hits really well and you get your fireworks, I'm back every 10 minutes. How many have we done now? How many have we done now? And if you go up 100 in 10 minutes, you're like, oh, it's amazing.
Yeah, especially when one really takes off, because it never looks smooth. It's like smooth for a bit and then a jump up. You're like, is it going to carry on the jump up? Yeah. Just a roller coaster.
Absolutely.
So let's say your channel got deleted tomorrow and you wanted to start again from scratch, but you couldn't do tech news. What kind of videos would you be making?
That's a really good one. It definitely wouldn't be sports, because I'm terrible at that. It would probably be trying to work on the stand-up stuff. But unfortunately, the style that I want to go into for the stand-up, because I do want to, as I say, carry on doing it, is tech-related stand-up. So, playing on the battles between Android and iOS users, and that sort of tribal nature that we have, I think is quite funny. The other thing would be maybe politics, because honestly, when I was doing the comedy with the politics kind of bent to it, I really enjoyed that. I do like watching things like Politics Joe. I don't know if you've seen any of that stuff, but I find it really, really good. Yeah, maybe a bit of politics, but kind of with some humour to it.
Yeah, that sounds like it'd be good. I think I have seen politics. Is it like the orange logo says Joe in black?
Yeah.
Yeah, I have seen quite a lot of that, yeah. Have you ever been recognised from the work you've done on YouTube or the podcast? Out and about in the real world?
Not quite, although I did do a little meet-up with some people that watched the channel in London the one time. But no, I haven't had that recognition yet of, oh, you're that guy from YouTube. I mean, I took a Mac down with me to Battersea in London. I took the classic Macintosh that I've got with an M1 inside. And the guys there absolutely went crazy for it. All the staff were like looking through the doors before it opened for the first time, and like taking pictures of me with it in the queue. And
Oh,
Apple's
that's cool.
photographer went crazy for it. And then none of those pictures ended up on Apple's website, which was really sad.
Oh, that is a shame.
But they made me set it up, and everyone was coming up to play with it and take pictures with it, so that was good, quite fun.
Yeah, did you do a video for it? That would have made like a
Yes.
really good vlog, yeah.
Yeah, so I did a sort of vloggy video for it. I actually met up with Sigmund that day as well. He was down there for the opening too, and he'd just got back from Cupertino because he was over at WWDC for the Vision Pro initial launch and had used it, so I was just interrogating him for the duration there. But yeah, it's something I've put up in shorts a couple of times, like POV of being first through the door, because obviously I filmed it as we walked through and everyone's cheering. Because Apple's
Yeah,
basically
I
the
saw the
Disney
short,
of
yeah.
tech.
Yeah, they run out to start clapping at you.
It's really exciting. It's good.
Yeah.
Really good vibes. Everyone was happy.
How long ago was it when you made your first YouTube video then? Was this
So
your
for-
first channel?
No, so I did have one, as I say, about the bartending stuff, and it started off really as being a video companion to the podcast that I was doing. So I was basically just started filming the podcast, and they were atrocious. But I interviewed some cool people for the podcast, like the guy that trained Tom Cruise on how to flip bottles. Had a like hour-long interview with him, which is really good. A guy called John Bandy. Yeah. But that was my first thing. It was a lot less professional, but it did mean that when I came to do the channel for tech, I kind of knew the basics at least.
Yeah, so how long are we talking there? So that's the start of
2014.
COVID, is it? Oh, 2014.
That's when I started doing the original bartender stuff. So I had a whole website that was full of recipes and technique stuff, and then started the podcast off the back of that. Probably about 2015 the podcast started, actually.
A decade now then. So what would Dave from a decade ago, what advice would you give Dave, what advice would Dave today give Dave from a decade ago when it comes to YouTube?
Make videos about tech instead of bartending, because nobody cares.
Yeah, I had a similar experience. I had a football shirt related channel at the start, and it was doing really, really well. But then you get to that point where it's like, this is doing well, but is this something I want to be doing for a long time?
Yeah.
Which is where I've changed into like, I've got the tech side of things, and I've got this podcast now as well, which I'm really excited to like create videos now with the football shirt kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
After you've done like 2 seasons, it's like, they're very much the same.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing I would say is like with when you're choosing your topic, just bear in mind what you're able to do when it relates to your job. So when I started the bartender channel, it was when I was bartending and I was on the other side of it, and working with wholesalers and that sort of stuff. But as I then moved into working for brands, it does mean that you can't really then talk about other brands in a fair way, or you can't talk about your own brands because everything needs to go through legal. So it really massively limits what you can do. So like if you work for a tech company, probably don't do a tech podcast unless you're just commenting on the news. You know, you could do that, but you're also going to have inherent biases that are built into it, and you might get in trouble with work. Whereas if you do something that's a passion project, like which is why I'm doing iCaveDave as a tech thing and working in the drinks industry, like you get that separation, you get to kind of indulge your hobbies, and that's kind of why.
It becomes risky business when you're trying to cross over work and pleasure.
Yeah, absolutely.
So why did you start a YouTube channel? What was the driving force behind getting going?
Boredom.
Yeah.
just boredom. I as I say, at the start of COVID, we're all sitting around. I wanted to make content. I always enjoy making content. I like talking. I love the adoration of my fans. You know, the money. No, this is one of those things that costs you a lot of money. It does not make you a lot of money, at least early days. Once you get into the sort of hundreds of thousands of subscribers, which I'm very far away from, then, we could be talking about it being a full-time job, which would be grand one day. But it's not something that's on the horizon for me just yet. It's definitely a passion project. It's something that I love. I would be talking about this stuff all the time anyway, so why not say it into a camera?
Yeah, I'm a COVID creator, so my first child was born out of boredom, and then you get hooked with YouTube, and I don't think I can see myself doing anything else. Well, I don't think I can see myself doing, like, dropping this as a hobby. I think this will be like a lifelong hobby now, which will be fantastic. I can see myself at like 60 years old. I've retired from, 70 years old, retired from work, just pottering around my garden with a camera, something like that.
Yeah. I mean, it's fun, and you do get to meet cool people by doing it. Like, as I say, last week I was chatting to John Prosser, who, if anyone follows the Apple scene, you'll know John. He used to be one of the biggest leakers on the scene. Now it's more sort of commentary, and he did a fantastic documentary about Tim Cook and why Tim Cook is, like, so much better for Apple than Steve Jobs ever was. Which is controversial at the start, but you watch it and you're like, yeah, you're right.
That's one of those kind of things where you want him to do more of that, but it takes time. So you're like, I want you to do more of it, but don't rush it.
Yeah,
exactly. Take your time with it, because that Marquez one was fantastic as well. Yeah,
there's some great stuff out there, and there's, I think, what I do is what people would call, I guess, low effort content, but it's the volume for me. And if you're doing a news show, like, there's no reason for me to put out a daily Apple news show in more than 1080p, as long as it looks okay, it sounds okay, it's not distracting from the story. Like, that's what I'm here for, is to kind of share the news and sort of my insight into it. Like, what will this mean? I think the leaking stuff is interesting. I've never been in touch directly with people that have the inside scoops. That's not what I do. I report on when something gets dropped by the general kind of tech media, the ones that are in touch, people like John was. I would sort of look at it and go, right, so what's this actually going to mean for the products that come down the line from it? If this is true, what will this mean for the next MacBook? What will this mean for the next iPhone? And at the minute, it looks like I'm going to have to go up to a bigger iPhone next time, purely because I want the nicer main camera, which they're talking about, which might, again, only be exclusive to the big one. And I prefer the smaller size, but, if I shoot all of my stuff on the main camera, I probably need to have the better one.
Yeah, I mean, not dealing in leaks directly as well, it removes the risk factor, because you haven't got to just worry about the laws where you are. You've got to worry about the laws where the person who's leaking's from, making sure that you don't out them, that they're the person giving it, because you don't want to get in trouble. So, like, reporting on the leaks that have come out in the news, it's a much safer way of doing it and reporting on it that way.
Yeah, and I think trying to be first to stuff, it has its advantages, but also if you're scrabbling to do that, you're not taking any time to think about what it is, and is this likely to be legitimate, I guess. A lot of those initial leaks, it's like, oh, someone has said this is coming, and you're like, well, you look at it and you're like, well, that's not practical at all, that can't physically work. I have a bit of an engineering background, so when I was at university, I was studying product design engineering. So things like material science is really interesting to me. I've always been like a physicsy kind of person. I mean, I'm not good at like computer science. That was the one thing that let me down at uni, which is why I never ended up with a degree. We had to do some programming stuff, but I could not get my head around that part. But I think just having a sort of broader knowledge of things and looking at materials and, well, this could be used for this because X, Y, and Z. So
it's time for a bit of self-reflection then. For your YouTube videos, what would you rate your videos out of 10?
I think they're around about a solid 6.
What do you think it would take to bump them up to like the next level?
A team of 7 working on it daily. Someone else to do the editing. Someone else to do sound mixing, stuff like that.
That would be the dream.
Yeah, I mean, and there's always been people that approach you. Oh, do you want an editor? Well, I haven't got a budget for an editor. I'm not making money off of this, really. I think last month I made something like 70 quid, off of the AdSense. It's not a lucrative thing in any way, shape or form, and I put more than full-time hours into it. So I feel like that's just under minimum wage. So, but also it's more of an issue of I have to shoot these when I have time, and I need to turn them around quickly once I have done. So you can't really have an editor that just receives stuff randomly and is
Yeah.
like, right, you need to do it now. That's not how having a team works. So no, for me, unless this became a full-time thing, I wouldn't ever have anyone else working on it with me. The collaboration side of things is great, just like this, where we get to chat and sort of reach each other's audiences and also kind of learn from each other. That's always really interesting. The more we can collaborate with different people, that's kind of the one thing that I think brings us up.
Yeah, the collaboration side of things is something I'm really looking forward to this year. It's something that I'm really putting an emphasis on as well. But money-wise, I think if the YouTube channel makes enough to take me out for a meal once a month, that's sort of a bonus at this point.
Yeah. I mean, if over a couple of months it's going to pay for the new sound stuff, so that's fine.
Is there anything about being a creator then that surprised you or caught you off guard? Something that you weren't expecting?
I guess actually it's what we just touched on. It's the community of other creators. Like, everyone is very giving of their time. Everyone is very supportive of what's going on. I think it's nice that it's not we don't feel like we're competing for views, because we're not. Like, it's not like there's a set number of views out there and you have to get your share of them. Like, if stuff is good, people will stay on and watch more.
Yeah.
I think that's the big thing. And people that have been creating for a long time, like John Prosser, has always been very, very generous with his time with me and with other creators as well. I know of a handful that have all said, "Oh yeah, John is one of the people that really brought me up," and so thank you to John.
Yeah. Have you set yourself any goals for the next 12 months then? It can be YouTube related, it can be comedy related, just...
So for a long time, I was sitting just under 12,000 subs. And I just, for some reason, plateaued, could not get past it. And then last week we broke through it. We're up to about 1250 now, which is good. I would really like to get up to 20k. So basically nearly doubling the channel in size. Yeah, put an extra 60% on there. That'd be quite nice. I feel like those big numbers at the beginning, when they go up, that makes you feel good. So, yeah. I'd like to get up to 20k, maybe in the next 12 months. I think that'd be reasonably possible if the podcast carries on and stuff. So,
yeah, the podcast views seem to be doing great, don't they?
yeah.
Did you expect that for something so long form?
Not necessarily. I know with the John's one, they were typically doing about 500 or 600 views, and then obviously it's also going out as audio, which I need to have a look at how many that's getting. But it's really difficult to get people to an audio podcast in the first place, because there's no real sort of discoverability that's there in podcast apps in general. We're hosting everything with Spotify, which is great because it's free, which is really good, because it's what used to be Anchor for podcasts, and now it's part of Spotify, which is really good. But yeah, discoverability is always the issue, which is why I'm also doing the video side of it, so that you can then chop it up, get those clips out there, people discover it. That's the idea. And yeah, the one with John obviously was doing similar to the others, 500-600 views in the first day, and then John shared it on his page, and it went up to about 2,000 and a bit at the minute. So, but when you look at the Genius Bar, they don't get massive views. I think it's more of an audio consumption for them as well. So, yeah, I don't mind that.
No, I think that's a good place to call it then, Dave. Thank you so much for coming on. I'm going to link your channel and everything down in the description. Is there anything that you wanted to give a shout out to?
Not massively, no. X is where I tend to hang out most of the time, so it's at iCaveDave, or maybe with an underscore in there. I can't remember. I think it's got an underscore. But yeah, put in iCaveDave on stuff and you'll find me. That's where I am.
That's great. And before I let you go, are there any creators from the UK that you think I should try and get on?
Ooh, Alex, who has done some stuff with David Lewis. He's really interesting, and the stuff that he's been doing with his Portuguese language channel, he's absolutely taken off with that as well really quickly. So that would be good. Who else is there? Saran, who did my second podcast. I don't know if you know Saran Bites. But he's very fun as well. He's London based, I think. I'm trying to think who else. There's a guy.
I did watch that podcast as well, where the planes kept flying over.
Yeah, that was great fun. And then immediately people came up in the comments and said, you know, macOS Sonoma's got like a voice isolation thing. It would have taken all that out. I was like, why didn't Saran know about this?
I think this does as well.
Yeah. But yeah, fantastic. No, I think that's the core for you.